Hello, lovely people. My name is Rohit, and I welcome you all to the Certify podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the intricate landscape of IoT security with our experts. We explore risks, vulnerabilities, and solutions which are shaping the future of connected devices. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting Matteo, who is a manager for cybersecurity technologies and innovation at European Cybersecurity Organization. Matteo, welcome to the show.
Hello everyone. Thank you and glad to be here.
Thanks a lot for your time. I know you are busy, and ECSO is also quite busy in working on different policies and the regulations which are coming out of European Union and Commission. And you are working as a manager at ECSO. So could you tell us about your journey so far? How did you get into this role, and what do you bring to the table?
Yeah. So first of all, it's quite like diverse journey, probably a strange one. It's not maybe very common. As I started working, studying in particular political science and international relations, and many people study that. Let's say many people who end up in Brussels have that particular background. But after some experiences, I started to get some interest in some cybersecurity topics. In particular, I started to meet cybersecurity professionals, and I was somehow attracted by the topic. And I remember at some point, I started also to see connection with what I had studied and cybersecurity in general. And actually, I saw questions arising, more questions than answers, to be fair.
Right.
And I saw that few people were answering those. So I decided to try to get professional experience in the IT area, cybersecurity if possible, but starting with IT. And I landed a job here in Brussels on software adoption. I started working on electronic signature softwares. Being in software adoption, I didn't need a technical background, but I was interacting a lot with different diverse let's say, teams within the company. And after that, I moved into a role always in software adoption, but in larger players, so Cisco in networking, where I spent there roughly almost 4 years. And as I said, after Cisco, I joined ECSO. Now, ECSO is the European Cybersecurity Organization. We bring together more than 300 members that have a stake or that are either cybersecurity vendors, but we also have national authorities, the organization representing the market. So we really try to bring the voice of the cybersecurity industry at the EU level. And with that, we are able to also interact with a lot of stakeholders here in Brussels in order to support, in particular for what we're discussing today, the implementation of specific and important piece of law, regulation, or standard. What I think I can bring in this role is simply that I don't have a technical background, but I'm used to bridging these gaps between these different worlds of technical and non-technical people. And that's what probably is required nowadays in the cybersecurity landscape, and all the more so in the Certify project.
Yeah, definitely. In the, as you mentioned, Certify project, and ESCO is also a project partner in this project. What does ECSO is doing in this project?
So ECSO is obviously participating in this project in the areas that regards dissemination, namely because because of the outreach we can perform. But I would say there are two areas important where ECSO is contributing in Certify. One is trying to liaise and create connection also with the institutional level, so the European Union stakeholder level, because obviously Certify, being also a research project, has also the ambition to be concrete in some of the policy development that are happening in Europe. And with regard to this in particular, we've been spending quite some effort with the colleagues in Certify on try to pilot some of the functionalities of Certify, thinking them from the point of view of a regulation. So not only having a technical workshop, understanding how things should work, but understanding how things would work and would look like vis-a-vis the main relevant piece of law that are out there today.
Right. And which regulations do you see are quite relevant for Certify project, which focuses on the IoT security?
Well, definitely the Cyber Resilience Act is I think is also mentioned a lot in the documents of Certify. Cyber Resilience Act started indeed actually targeting IoT projects, and with time the scope became greater. So I would say today is a very, very large piece of legislation with touches also in many areas standalone software. So it's impacting a huge part of the market, but obviously, if we stick to the definition of the scope of Cyber Resilience Act, so product with digital elements,
Right.
there's a clear reference to a hardware and software part in the product in scopes, and Certify it's basically focusing mainly on this.
Right. And how do you see the preparation of SMEs, especially in Europe, for the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act? Are they ready for the Cyber Resilience Act? Because now, I think in October 2024, this was published.
In this November, I think. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
It's end of 2024. Yeah.
Right. And now it kicks in, and it's in the phase where the companies, small and medium enterprises, they, I think, are in quite danger in terms of, first thing, that they don't have the enough resources in terms of money, and also in terms of human resources. The cybersecurity experts who can get into these complex regulations, as you mentioned, it's quite complex, and then implement their products, their softwares in such a way that it confront or it's in align with CRA regulation. How do you see that, and how ECSO kind of organization help SMEs or other stakeholders in the European Union?
Yes. Well, that's a question that has also an answer in itself, because the SMEs problem is always let's put it like that, SMEs compose the large majority of the European economy, so you need to get them prepared to legislation in order to make it work. And like for many other pieces of legislation, I mean, recently there has been other regulation that passed. There is directive, which is NIS2, but DORA, other cybersecurity relevant texts from the EU, and the market is a bit bombarded and need to be able to comply to these. And I mean, compliance to this regulation obviously is done in view of securing and improving the security posture of the market overall, so of SMEs as well. But the downside is that with such a large number of information, many SMEs are not aware of simply the content of the regulation, sometimes even that the regulation is coming. And in the Cyber Resilience Act, I would say many organizations are not aware that they are in scope. That's what we're funding. And what we're doing, we're trying to work with a lot of other stakeholders here in Brussels, because everyone is talking about this regulation, on how to facilitate and help, especially SMEs, understanding what they need to do, and in particular, what they need to do to show compliance. So the part on conformity assessment is very important, and understanding how they can be compliant to the CRA. Obviously, we can't remove some of the inherent costs that might arise from this, but definitely what we see is that when it comes to Cyber Resilience Act, many of the essential requirements that will need to be that companies will need to comply with and complying with standards once they will be published. Many of these requirements are not rocket science in a way. Sometimes SMEs already perform this type of operations. But they need to be helped indeed in understanding how they can show that they are compliant to this, so that this regulation doesn't become just another paperwork, but it's really something that is increasing the security level of the market.
And how do you see the outlook of Cyber Resilience Act in terms of what's going to happen now? So it's been published, it kicks in after 20 days of the publishment, it comes in effect. And what is the timeline now going ahead for Cyber Resilience Act and for the companies which have to comply with this regulation?
Well, that's a bit of like, I don't want to say imprecise things, but there's obviously a transition period before the regulation will be enforced. And that's due to the fact that for the majority of the product, the big bulk of the product that are in the scope of the CRA, they need standards in order to prove that the conformity to the regulation. And these standards are not out yet. Now there's a lot of work being done, that there are standardization organizations working on drafting these standards. There are other questions concerning, for instance, the detailing of the product categories. Depending on the product categories you fall in, you can have a different way of showing conformity. So there are a number of things that are still happening, and they will happen via other steps that the legislator will take, so that will clarify. We have a text, but we also have other pieces of text that will come out to clarify the function of the regulation. And if I'm not wrong, for manufacturer, the enforcement will start in 2 years. And the overall the legislation transition period is after 3 years after entering into force. So it might seem like a long period, but even for small SMEs or micro SMEs, sometimes the design phase starts way in advance, and also working to be compliant, the work to be compliant starts well in advance. So there's a lot of awareness raising that was going to happen around the CRA in the upcoming month. That's one of the main steps that I think is undergoing, and that's also what Certify is probably try to do with disseminating some of the activities that we're doing with the consortium.
Right. And at the policy level in the Certify project, what you guys are doing, and how the Certify project would help in, let's say, raising the awareness and bringing the technologies that they are working on for the IoT security. How do you channelize these information to your stakeholders, and how does it help a project like Certify?
Well, projects like Certifies are very, being research project or Horizon project, there's a bit of, like, I like to say, a gap between part of the community who knows very little about the policy problems, and another part who's very expert. And Certify can be an interesting case study for us, because we started to analyze some of the use cases that are dealt with in the project. In particular, we've been looking at connected cabin system use case. I don't have a technical background, but I started to work with the engineers who work on that use case. And as I said, some of the consideration we made in one paper that we published, but also we participated in writing chapters of book in research conferences. Some of the consideration that we made there are indeed basically essentially testing how policy can be happening, how the policy is going to be implemented in practice. So that's one of the main outcome, I would say, and definitely something else that we do when we do our normal outreach activities to the outside world. We also mentioned the project we're involved in, being Certified one of them. We also explain how the industry, not only the industry, but also the research community, is looking at ways to build security in a way that is also take compliance into account, which is what Certify is trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned about the Cyber Resilience Act. Are there any, and you briefly mentioned about NIS2 directive as well. Are there any other regulations which are coming out of European Union and Commission which are quite relevant for cybersecurity perspective?
Well, I have to be completely honest. I've been really deep diving on Cyber Resilience Act in the past, so that's where we've had most of our discussion. But there is another piece of legislation that's gonna be important. Well, not necessarily for IoT, but it will touch upon cybersecurity, which is the Cyber Solidarity Act.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the past, the Cybersecurity Act, which was laying a bit the framework for certifications, and so also the certification schemes, so the EUCC. But I'm thinking as well about the AI Act. I mean, maybe more in a not as in a close way, but obviously there are definitely AI system. There's already some overlap with CRA and AI. There are references to this regulation in each text, but I think I would say these are the landscape text that might be important for Certify, with a big prominence of Cyber Resilience Act.
Right. And as you mentioned, I could say that you are an expert on Cyber Resilience Act, and you have been reading quite a lot on this piece of regulation. If I ask you what are the game-changing thing in the Cyber Resilience Act, why it would be more effective than, let's say, any other regulations which are out there for the cybersecurity? What makes it more effective?
Well, first of all, let me say I never and I don't consider myself an expert because I work with real experts, so I know I'm not one. But I can give you my perspective. I think it's a massive piece of regulation. Some people, we were used to call it the GDPR for cybersecurity, because first of all, it is an horizontal piece of legislation. As I said, that the number of requirements that are asked that are required indeed by the CRA are sometimes mapped to standards that already exist out there and that are, I wouldn't say common practice, but that are regularly learned and performed by cybersecurity expert professionals. Now, the CRA is basically mandating all this in an horizontal way to a huge number of market operators, because if you consider that product with digital elements, there are some exclusion, but they can be really a lot of product which have some sort of software connection. Therefore, I would say the scope is really massive, and the fact that he's mandating these essential requirements, that he call it, it's really important. But also, what is interesting is that it's also in the essential requirements. There is also not only product requirements, but also procedural requirements. There are some innovative piece of technology that some expert haven't, I wouldn't say not haven't heard of, but there are many elements that in cybersecurity professionals are not necessarily used to deal with, and that suddenly the Cyber Resilience Act put there as sort of also best practices, but also mandating some of those. For instance, how to handle vulnerabilities is something there should be a clear policy within organization. Organization should have a software bill of material, which is, you help in mapping where your vulnerabilities stand, but also respond to those. And these, in a nutshell, are the scope and the fact that it's mandating this requirement are some of the things that comes to mind. Obviously, there are many others. It's very large piece of legislation, but that's the game-changing part to me. And obviously, also is forcing the Cyber Resilience Act is forcing the overall regulatory system to think in a way that hasn't thought before, meaning working with the software industry, working with things that evolve so fast. It needs to provide ways to be more agile and to also add in the future for instance, new categories or other areas that were not foreseen in the beginning when the piece of the text was written.
Right, right. Yeah, quite often I hear this expression that USA is a land of innovation and EU is a land of regulation. Regulations are quite important and policies are also quite important, as we are seeing in last 2-3 years about AI, what AI can do, and we need to regulate this piece of really technology. How do you see that when a regulation or policy becomes so complex and so big that it starts to hinder the progress of the industries in that area? So do you see that it could happen with the CRA as well, that it could have negative
Well,
impact?
I'll need to remove my hat of ECSO and also of Certify, because this is really more like of a philosophical trade-off question. And
Yeah,
to be honest, I don't think there's a straight answer to these. I think, as I said, there is a trade-off between regulating and not regulating, but letting, the market being the live testing bed. I think
right,
it's a trade-off, because if you do not regulate, many things will, let me put it this way. Once, when I was starting working my first company, I've asked if cybersecurity would always be a problem in our societies, to a cryptographic expert. And he told me, which I found a very good analogy, made an analogy with the car industry. He said, at the beginning, cars were exploding, there were accidents, there were a lot of things that were not working. But with time, these things mature into safer vehicles. And then,
right,
moving on. I think the good side of Cyber Resilience Act of regulation in general is that it's taking some best practices, something that should be done in cybersecurity, that even if they're not mandated, you as a cybersecurity professional, you try to implement, and is mandating those, is saying, okay, we need to implement this.
right,
Now, again, I'm not talking, I'm talking for myself, but personally, I think this is more like a legal problem. The question is, AI Act, Cyber Resilience Act are trying to capture a reality that is moving so fast. And so the
right,
question is, how can they be agile enough to cover these areas? I think it's possible. Obviously, there will be some initial maybe cost or hindering the innovation, but then we should also check, maybe we should take a look also a time frame that is a bit longer. Let's
right,
see what happened in a country where there's no regulation at all about cybersecurity vis-a-vis a country that has regulated, and where we're standing now with that. We could talk about GDPR in that regard, but that's something we need to, it's more of a philosophical question to me.
right.
And again, at the end of the day, it comes as a trade-off.
And you work in Brussels, and you mentioned that ECSO has a lot of stakeholders, and for sure you interact with stakeholders outside European Union as well, and they have their own policies on cybersecurity market. How do you see the or the difference in the approach that, for example, US policy makers have on the emerging cybersecurity challenges?
Well, I can only, again, talk to my impression here, because we have dedicated colleagues who work on let's say, relation with outside Europe.
Yeah,
And I think overall there are a number of discussions with delegation from different areas of the world that are not Europeans. And obviously with the US, there's clearly, not only at ECSO level really, but at European level, there's a close dialogue.
right,
If I, it's basically what you just summarized before. I think in the US, there is regulation. Regulation is enforced,
yeah,
but there is more leeway to the regulation that we have in Europe today, it's just a step beyond what we see in other parts of the world. Actually, some even states and countries are trying to learn from us, which is a good sign because it means that Europe can set a standard. But I would
Right.
say maybe innovation it's stronger in some countries like the US, but it's not only due to lack of regulation. It also due, for instance, I think to other elements, which is, for instance, investments and availability of funding. That's also are things that play a role. And I also want to say we need to see what happened as of yesterday, basically, because with the new administration in the US, things can change a lot. Even
Right.
though probably the core approach to innovation and to regulating IT is going to be the same, but I wouldn't exclude the different administration would have a different impact on this type of areas.
Yeah, definitely. You touched upon the awareness part, that which is quite important for the execution of the CRA regulation. What kind of different activities ECSO carry out for raising the awareness about the regulations among the stakeholders and also going beyond the stakeholders?
Well, at ECSO, we have a number of activities. First of all, we're organized in working group,
Yeah,
and I participate in the working group and that's why I'm involved with Certify that works on certification, policy implementation, supply chain. But we have other groups that focus particularly with SMEs on policy developments, on investment and on education,
right,
to just name a few. What we tend to do is organize events, webinars, either internal for our members, but also we sometimes do awareness raising activities for the outside world. And we also we have a number of events along the year. Some are recurring, like for instance, we have a community of CISOs, but also we have what we call the ECSO days, where we convey our community of friends, but also members and non-members. We publish paper, sometimes technical paper, but many other time just simple guidelines on how to approach specific regulation. We just did this week publish also some paper, white paper concerning NIS2 implementation. So I would say this publication and event creation is the main form for us to create awareness with the outside world. And then, of course, many people come to us with specific questions. We have a lot of proposal from cybersecurity stakeholders and members to carry on with specific activities.
okay. And what would you suggest? What are the different channels or the resources that people can access to know more about these regulations? For example, CRA. If I want to learn about CRA at very deep level, what are the different channels exist? Does ECSO has some kind of, you mentioned about like white paper, which summarizes the requirements and the implementation part of the NIS2? Are there similar things for CRA as well?
Well, for CRA, we're building a similar material. Obviously, NIS comes a bit earlier in time, but the deadline for the implementation at state level was last December. So for ECSO, we've been producing more of a report on based on the survey that we had internally, and what are the challenges that the industry is facing, or the perceived challenges with the implementation of the CRA. Obviously, there's a lot of official material. If someone wants to deep dive, obviously the text is the main reference, but also guidelines made by some of the European institutions. But organizations like ECSO and many others, we are publishing a lot of these guidelines, and particularly with the CRA, what we'd like to do, depending also a bit on some of the activities and the stakeholders we're cooperating with, is to propose a sort of like very simple getting started guideline for SME in particular. What is the CRA? Where do I need to start for when it comes to compliance? What would be the implication? Am I under the scope of the CRA? These are very short publication that we're looking for publishing. Obviously, we have a number of other activities concerning the CRA. some more institutionals as well. They're taking a lot of time, so we're not a huge team either. So we need to balance that a bit.
Okay. Normally, these working groups that you mentioned, how big are these working groups? How many people work?
That really depends. I mean, ECSO has 300 members, and then when an organization becomes a member of ECSO, they have access to all the working groups within ECSO, and then they can decide who from the organization they can send to this working group. So it could be that one person from one micro SME comes to all the working group. It could be that a large multinational company is sending 3 people in one working group for another. And it's a bit like also based on their expertise and their interest. And sometimes, like I did it this morning, for instance, if I work on other technologies like quantum encryption, I go myself proactively checking our ECSO membership who is interested in participating. But just to answer your question, it can really vary. So based on knowing that we have 300 members, where members are very different size organization, working groups can go as little as 30 people are manageable, where you can have manageable discussion and workshop, or way larger sessions. I think 2 days ago, there was one with 130, 140 people. So that's more just, it was another working group. So it really depends on the working group, but I would say this is a bit the thresh. It goes between 30 and 120, 130, depending on my experience.
Okay, wow. And is it also quite normal that ECSO participate in these EU research projects like Certify?
Well, I would say I don't know if I can answer the question because I haven't been in ECSO long enough. But yeah, at least we've been present in few of these projects, but it's not, let's say, the main obviously the main focus area for ECSO is the work of its working group and the community that is fostering.
Right. Matteo, thanks a lot for your time. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. And
Likewise.
I wish you a lot of luck for the Certify project.
Finger crossed. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone who's been listening.
Thanks.